is we've been here before, haven't we? Because we had a report after the Jimmy Savile scandal, and that just, it felt like really nothing changed after that.
Welcome back. I'm Nana Acquia. This is GB News. Let's move on to the BBC, who must act faster when staff cross the line. That is the verdict of a major workplace review. Well, we can now speak to a former BBC correspondent, Danny Shaw. Danny, what do you make of the BBC? They've taken on all the points that were made in this 62-page report. What's your view?
Hi, Nana. I mean, my view about it is that this is a decent enough report. It looks pretty comprehensive. They're saying all the right things. They've set some examples. They've given a bit of perspective. I think it is true. I don't think there is a toxic environment working there. I worked for the BBC for 31 years and I still contribute to the BBC, and I'm in touch with a lot of people that work there. I don't think anyone would say it's toxic, but it is true. There are pockets of bad behaviour. There are certain individuals who have regarded themselves as untouchable, where people feel they can't speak up. So I think the report's accurate, and I think a reset on behaviour, the emphasis on calling it out, more transparency and improved HR process, all of that is really good. But my two main concerns, one is we've been here before, haven't we? Because we had a report after the Jimmy Savile scandal, and that just, it felt like really nothing changed after that. So my concern is this is just going to be another report, lots of fine words and so on, nothing really changes significantly. The second thing I think is missing from the report, and it hardly gives any attention to this, is the huge salaries that are earned by some individuals, both in front of the screen and behind the camera, in managerial roles and senior editor roles. And, compared with what producers and journalists are earning. There are massive imbalances there. There are some people who are earning 200, 300, 400, 500,000 pounds and more, working with people who are on 35, 40,000 pounds. And when you get imbalances like that, that accentuates the risk of bad behavior. It creates disharmony within teams. And I've seen it myself. And I don't think the report does enough to sort of call for that to be addressed. I personally think that a BBC that's funded by licence fees, essentially it's a public organisation, public sector organisation, essentially, I think it needs a much flatter salary structure. The benefits of working at the BBC, the conditions working at the BBC are really, really good. You shouldn't need to earn 300, 400, 500,000 pounds. For all the freedom that you have working at the BBC. That's my view. A flatter wage structure would actually help address some of those power imbalances.
Was there any mention of, say, for example, Hugh Edwards, he carried on being paid, and then later on they tried to see if they could get money back off him? Was there any comment about if someone leaves in disgrace, whether they can deal with that and whether they'd look at pensions and things like that? Because that's one of the biggest costs for the BBC is actually the pensions that they're paying out to people who leave the organisation.
Using the internet without a VPN, a virtual private network, is a bit like taking to the road without car insurance. All it takes is one unlucky moment to cost you a lot of cash. This video's sponsor is Private Internet Access. They are the VPN to help keep you safe. Click the link in the description below to find out why over 30 million people have downloaded PIA to protect themselves online. A virtual private network is an app that hides your IP address and helps keep your data private. When you're browsing the internet at home, you give up a large amount of data to businesses, to shops, and indeed to social media giants too. Hackers have the ability to steal your personal data with ease, including sensitive information such as passwords, keystrokes, and even your personal photos. Private Internet Access helps protect your personal data by encrypting your internet connection to keep your data out of the hands of cyber criminals. And it's not just hackers either to be concerned about. Information can be censored too. When Canada passed their C18 bill, social media giants decided to ban news content on their platforms. But PIA can protect your ability to consume the news and content you love. Private Internet Access is available for Windows users, Mac OS, Android, Linux, iOS, and you can use one PIA subscription to to protect an unlimited amount of devices. And we've got a huge GB News discount for you too. Click the link in this video's description and you'll get a massive 83% off PIA. That's under £2 a month, the price of a coffee, and you'll get an extra 4 months completely free on top. Also, there's a 30-day money-back guarantee too. Visit piavpn.com/GB News to start protecting yourself digitally today.
I didn't see anything in the report about that. I don't think that was in its terms of reference. I mean, that was a situation where I think he was legally entitled to the money, and he refused to give it back. And I don't think the BBC legally could have done anything about it. Now, going forward, it may be that they toughen up the rules and put something in contracts to make it clear that in those situations you forfeit the cash, or at least it's suspended. And then if you are convicted, it's removed from you. So there is certainly some toughening up there they can do. This is more about the culture of the place. I mean, look, I think things are better than they were 20 years ago. When I first joined the BBC back in the late 80s, 1990s, I mean, people would have tantrums. They really would throw things around a room, shouting, swearing, and all that kind of behaviour was tolerated to some degree. Of course, there will be tensions and there will be creative differences and arguments about running orders and what stories, should be done. I'm sure that happens at GB News as well. You need a bit of that. You need a bit of that. What you can't have is people behaving inappropriately.
Totally agree with you. All right, Danny Shaw, really good to talk to you. He's a former BBC correspondent that is speaking to us about the BBC in a report, a 62-page report. Of course, remember that moment with Hugh Edwards? Yes, he was due to leave. He eventually left, but they still carried on paying him, didn't they? So that wasn't great. Ending his broadcast career in disgrace, BBC Director General Tim Davie says today's report marks a pivotal moment and the corporation is expected to embrace all recommendations. Let's talk to GB News reporter Adam Cherry. Adam, what more can you tell us?
So it's a long report, 62 pages. It's been in the offing since last year, of course, since that all kicked off with Hugh Edwards. 2,500 staff interviewed. They were presented the findings today, and as you said, they're going to accept all the recommendations in full. In the short term, that means sort of beefing up HR practices and taking complaints more seriously. Long term, building a more sort of robust infrastructure around that, and so on, making managers more accountable. The language of the report is quite interesting because like you said, they say there's no toxic workplace culture. And a lot of people love their jobs. In fact, they're at pains to make sure that was clear in the press release. So a lot of people like working here. Nonetheless, this is a direct quote from the report. A minority of people who behave unacceptably and whose behaviour is not addressed was uncovered. And these people work in both on and off-air roles, dotted across the organisation. They are often in positions where power could be abused. Even though they are small in number, their behaviour creates large ripples which negatively impact the BBC and its culture. So overall there's not a massive culture, and of course you've worked in the BBC.
I have done, yes.
But it seems like, well, the language is there. There are enough people in senior positions who either turn a blind eye to bad behaviour or are themselves enacting it, and that is creating a problem, and the BBC have today recognised that and say they will act on that immediately.
Well, that's good. Does it say much about when somebody behaves badly, about the period of time with which they'll actually get rid of them and also about payment, whether they should be paid after they've done something that has brought the organisation into disrepute?
Well, I wonder what you're talking about there, right? Yeah, of course. But I'm looking through all 62 pages yet. I'm doing my best to get through it.
Yeah.
But it does seem that is a bit of a problem.
Yeah.
Yeah, it doesn't reference payment specifically, at least not what I've seen, so I'll come back to you if there is more on that. But it does seem like that there is a culture of turning a blind eye and allowing things to fester for too long. Yeah. That's actually part of their response today, is being more robust in responding to that kind of problem much, much more quickly.
Well, we should keep our eye on that, but actions speak louder than words, so we'll see whether they actually follow through. Thank you very much, Adam Cherry.